Hi, Eugene. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
How are you doing, Grace? Thanks for having me.
Okay, so to start off the show, I would love for the audience to learn more about you. So you started your career in investment banking, and then you have worked at many iconic companies. I feel like you built a lot of great connections at Yahoo, and then later on, like Google, Pinterest, and why don't we start? And then now you're a partner at Omers Ventures. And why don't we start with, what are some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career that kind of shape you into who you are later on?
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. Yeah, like you said, I started off my career in investment banking, and I think um, when I came out of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do in life at all. And so the goal back then was to find something that would prepare me for the next journey and the next journey after that. And so I did investment banking. It was a great background in terms of just exposing me to one, finance, and then two, how great companies are built. And I think that provided me the foundation um, to go forward to the next career of all the companies that you listed. And I think that just taught me a lot about grit, a lot about doing the work, a lot about again some of the basics of what from at least from a financial perspective, what companies how companies are well run. But I would say I think the biggest learning from that experience was as people know, bankers work very long hours, and it is can you push yourself mentally and somewhat physically too from those long hours to do the work and to do the learning. And then over time you start just building those relationships with unfortunately the other friends and people that are in the office at the same time working those long hours. But I think that leads into my next kind of lesson in learning early and on in my career is those relationships matter. A lot of us from that crew of analyst class went on to do pretty good things, and we actually a bunch of us went to Yahoo, where we landed in some more operating roles. And I think the biggest takeaway, again, I'm still in my early 20s at that time.
Mhm,
I think the biggest learning I still take to this day is just the power of the network.
mhm,
And I was in Yahoo in 2004, 5, 6, somewhere in that time
mhm,
frame. And this was when Yahoo was high flying. I think Terry Semel was the CEO at that time. Um, you don't realize the great people, especially early on in your 20s, that you're working with, especially that some of them are execs are already, some of them are your peers, and they're going to go on and do great things. Um, Especially at a great company, you just don't realize like that was a fantastic moment in time to go meet great people. And then later in my life now, fast forward 20 years later, um, I think every job that I've found post Yahoo has been through a Yahoo connection. And so it just kind of, you just don't realize, there's other networks that were forming at the same time, Google, then later Facebook, and some of these iconic companies at a young age that it's probably better than my banking experience to provide that foundation because that group of people, excellent, high performing people that have gone in to do even better things,
mhm.
to be associated with that and to have that network is something that I'll cherish. And I'm still friends with a lot of those folks today. So that's kind of the biggest learning because you never know when you need to tap that network or you're part of that network to help those people uh, go forward.
Mm, for sure. I wonder, so like how do you since like you have been through these like some really big iconic companies network, and then how do you form your personal board of advisors, and how do you kind of like um I guess like who do you consult with each step of your career?
Yeah. I have a couple mentors,
Mhm,
some that have a couple that have come from that Yahoo kind of time period that were
mhm,
definitely people that I had reported into.
mhm,
I got lucky; they kind of took me under their wing, not just there, but a couple other places as well when I worked for them. Um, when I think about comprising you know people that I need to lean on, I think it's kind of diversity of of work, but also I also want my peers too, right? Because I think there's some people that I grew up with that know what I've actually been through, and we have had similar jobs that we can honestly kind of complain to each other, and that's kind of that venting. It kind of helps, kind of um, helps both of us. And I think the others is just trying to pinpoint pockets of where you're lacking. Is how I kind of think about it. The things that I'm not good at, that I want to be good at, that I try to pull people in to help me, and then hopefully, again, I think a lot of this advisory and mentorship thing is how do you get back. And so, me trying to be a mentor to other younger generation folks, that I can lean some of my experience from the operating perspective. A lot of the talk that I do right now with the younger generation of professionals coming up is my transition from operating to venture, and what was that like, and stuff like that. So I seek that out too. Those are the problems that when I was an early investor trying to figure out what is this investing thing that I just got myself into, like I needed help. And so it's just trying to pinpoint those pockets. And honestly, I've been grateful for those who've kind of mentored me along the way.
Mm. I wonder, okay, so maybe we can dive a little bit into more of like the skill side of things. So, I think on the other podcast, you chat a lot about like, financial modeling. I guess like what's one skill that you're constantly trying to get better at? It could be like soft skill, like sales, or like technical skill, like coding. Um, what would you say is like a skill that you're always trying to learn?
Um, Always trying to learn. That's a good one. Honestly, the one that I've always tried to get better at is I hate public speaking,
Mhm,
and I hate big group, kind
mhm,
of audience, kind of stick me in front of 1,000 people, and I'm like, I get nervous and scared. So
mhm,
those are the kinds of things I just continue to try to get better at. It's a little bit of the salesmanship,
mhm,
like kind of you mentioned that. I think in life, again, another learning, I guess, as you get older and you're more senior in any role, it's really a selling role. Whether you're not, even when you're not in traditional sales, right? Meaning,
mhm,
if you're a product manager or VP of product, you need to try to convince your CEO and the exec
mhm,
team of your product roadmap, right? That's
mhm,
selling. Me on the investing side, we love a deal. We want to take it and hopefully do the investment. We got to kind of sell our internal stakeholders that this is a great deal, right?
mhm,
And so I don't think that's an ever evolving skill, because you kind of have to jive and shift and react and to the questions that are being asked. Is something that you got to find your angle
mhm,
in your pitch, and I think that's a ever improving thing that I try to work on.
mm. Um, I like, how do you improve your sales skill? Like, is there anything that you actively do to like try to improve?
I think, I think presentation for sure,
Mhm,
and knowing the facts and being prepared is definitely the easiest one that
mhm,
anybody can do. Um, I don't know. People have different selling styles, right? Some it's
mhm,
relationships, some it's like you can be super charismatic and dynamic in meetings, and I think for me, it's just trying to stay true to who you are, but try to
mhm,
introduce some of those elements that you see other people that works, whether that's that magnetism when you sit in front of a founder that can kind of pull you in, or
mhm,
it's selling on the facts and the data and stuff like that. I think it's just trying to find the for me it's the right balance
mhm.
of pulling all those together into a very cohesive kind of story.
I completely agree with like, being prepared and then like technically like practice a lot. Okay, wanted to quickly say hello to the audience. Hi, Cherise. Okay, so maybe we could dive into Omers. Why don't we start with like, Omers, since Omers is like a multi-stage, multi-sector VC firm. And then why don't we start with like the origin of Omers Ventures and the all the good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Let me tell you a little bit about Omers Ventures and the team, because it's evolved over the last,
Mhm,
call it 13, 14, 15 years or so. So Omers Ventures is part of Omers, which is a very large pension plan in the Ontario province of Canada, based out of Toronto.
Mhm.
We are, call it an investment arm of them. We have a fund structure, and think pension meaning it's municipal workers of the Ontario province, firefighters, police officers of that sort. So it's actually a very privileged to be kind of directly tied to some of those and to hopefully return capital to those workers. We're an early stage fund. We are Series A, B, C investors. We focus on what we call four key categories: infrastructure software, fintech, vertical software, and then I lead all our enterprise application investments. Like I said, office and kind of headquarters in Toronto, but we've got a team in New York, and then most of the majority of the investors are here in the Bay Area.
Mhm.
Um, I would say we exclusively focus on, even though we have some Canadian roots, we're exclusively focused on North America, and a lot of that is in the U.S. But it's just finding the best deals elsewhere, or anywhere within kind of North America. Um, we're kind of newish to, I would say, the U.S. The origins of the fund was, like I said, as part of the larger pension plan. There's many different investment arms, and they're exclusively focused on Canada in the
Mhm.
early part of the fund. And there was a conscious decision to, if you want to do venture, kind of got to be where venture has really been successful, and that was in the U.S. and specifically in the Bay Area, and that's where we landed. In early January 2019, they brought on Michael Yang, who was at Comcast Ventures to start off the U.S. office, and then going back to our earlier conversation of
Mhm.
Yahoo, I knew Michael from our Yahoo days. We didn't work, directly and closely together, but he kind of knew a lot of the people who raised me at Yahoo, and I came on board shortly after Michael, just having that relationship to help him start the kind of U.S. practice. And it's obviously evolved a little bit over time, but now he leads our fund. And like I said, early stage investors, and that's kind of in North America under those four categories. And yeah, that's a little bit about kind of the fund and where we're focused.
Totally. I wonder maybe I guess like in terms of like I don't know if you want to talk about fund construction, but like since you guys invest in like through Series A to C, and how do you think about like the valuation and the reserve for between like these different stages? Just because I feel like the check size for each different stage is like very different from each other. Yeah, just curious about like your thinking on splitting the energy and the capital through different stages.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question. I think we've kind of iterated over time, at least since
Mhm,
I've been at Omers Ventures. I mean, I've been here I'm coming up on 5.5 years
mhm,
into Omers, and so I think it's varied because in 20 and 21, writing C checks were probably Series C checks were, with our fund size and our check sizes, probably pretty hard, like
mhm,
during the high times. So one thing I left out is we typically will write checks from roughly around 5 million to 20 million.
mhm,
And so during the 2021 time period when things were flying off the shelf, $20 million check probably couldn't get it done
mhm,
in that time period. I would say for us, how we think about it is um, I think we prefer to lead deals, and so that's typically writing slightly bigger checks into the first round that we participate in. But we have some flexibility there, right? We can lead, we can co-lead, and I would say as we think about portfolio construction, to your question, I think
mhm,
we tend to lean early in terms of Series A, Series B. But I think the beauty of kind of being multi-stage is we can go to the C route, but I would say I think I like to think about it as our core is probably at that Series A and B stage, and then with a little sprinkling of a C every now and again to kind of help round out some of the earlier companies in our portfolio to something that might, have a little bit more legs and more visibility to a path in the future.
mhm.
So that's where we probably skew a little bit earlier on that A to
For
C range.
For sure. I wonder, so like maybe if we could use any of, since you're a board member of like many different companies, I was like listening to the Mosaic Tech podcast. But so like I mean like if you want to use any of your current portfolio, maybe if you could walk us through how you find the founder, and then how do you kind of like evaluate the company, as well as like thinking about winning the deal and thinking about exit from a particular company. It could be any
Yeah,
company, and yeah.
yeah. I would say we can take either Mosaic that you just mentioned,
Mhm.
or the other one that comes to mind is WorkRamp as a
Mhm.
strategy that's kind of worked for us. So one of the things that we think about is in terms of right to win, getting in front of founders
Mhm.
is trying to be smart about a category. I think there's a danger for us as venture investors because we can be spread thin on there's so many different um, areas that you could go into, and I'm not just talking infrastructure to fintech to just within the enterprise where I kind of focus. There's many things that you can go into, and so what we try to do is come with a prepared mind and a thesis approach. And so in respect to WorkRamp, we had looked at um, kind of the learning market as a category of where we wanted to invest. And so we started to kind of dissect and come up with a thesis approach to what would last kind of in the next couple years. And that ultimately, when you start scaling it down a little bit, it starts coming down to a handful of companies where we try to
Mhm.
get in front of. And I proactively reached out to Ted, the CEO and founder of WorkRamp, with literally here's my view of the future
Mhm.
and what you're doing. And it resonated with him. And that kind of led to ultimately a fundraise to the deal. Similar with Mosaic on the CFO side. I wrote a piece 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago. It's probably dated on the office of the CFO. And that deal with Mosaic was probably 2 years in the making when we had an opportunity to invest. So we kind of go hunting from that perspective on
Mhm.
the thesis approach and sharing our ideas to get in front of founders so that we actually hopefully know what we're talking
Mhm.
about, or we should be proven wrong by some of the founders.
Mm. I wonder when it comes to like thinking about valuation, as well as like thinking about like specific benchmarks, is there any like particular cutoff line for you to like evaluate the different companies? Since I feel like nowadays, like with all the AI companies, valuation can be really varies. And like also the benchmark on like how much AR you're generating, or like other specific metrics. Is there anything that like in the stat of benchmark that you are specifically looking for?
Um, I wouldn't say they're hard benchmarks, right? I
Mhm.
think in the past there was always you would hear, oh, you have to cross 1 million of ARR,
Mhm.
to kind of be in a bucket. I think for us,
Mhm.
again, there's a lot of component pieces that kind of all fit the puzzle piece together. And yes, revenue or ARR is a component of that. But I think there's a lot of other things that are on the softer side that matter to us. Some of the kind of well-known of team, right? That's definitely one. I think the others, like it's momentum, and that momentum, if you're especially, I'm talking about super early state, like
Mhm.
earlier stage, later in the B's and the C's, you will have some metrics to kind of like test that. But anything momentum, like yeah, hopefully you're growing your pipeline. Hopefully that's converting. Hopefully there's something that we talk about internally is how fast are they shipping products, right?
Mhm.
That from a product velocity perspective, especially at the early perspectives, that all kind of leans itself into valuation. I think what you're seeing right now with all these AI companies, and we've seen plenty of them where they're growing rapidly, like it's crazy growth. Like
Mhm.
it's the first time I've seen stuff that's it's phenomenal. There's always is it the question of will it stick? Will it's durable? It's all nice and new and
Mhm.
shiny, but the growth is incredible. And you kind of have to take all those considerations in to kind of come up with the valuation.
For sure. I wonder when you're saying like companies that are growing really fast. Can you give us like a maybe an example? Obviously, we don't have to point out a specific company or whatever. Maybe just like talking about the product or talking about, I guess like, what consider as like a fast growth at this point. And I wonder how do you benchmark like each AI sector? So like, we previously talked about like since you are leading their enterprise, so like I wonder since I feel like nowadays, like in the Bay Area, like every company, not every company, like many companies are considered enterprise. Like, how do you quickly choose between these like different AI agents or like um specific sub sectors within this category that to find something that you find exciting?
Yeah, yeah. I can kind of give you the. I think first you kind of ask just like examples of companies that have exhibited high growth. Obviously, I won't name names, but we've seen companies within the marketing, let's call it the broader marketing realm, go from zero in revenue in 2024 to 5-6 million within a
Oh,
year.
wow.
We've seen some that have gone from 0 to 10, 0 to 7 in marketing in the areas where AI agents can do the most work in those kind of
Mhm.
labor manual tasks kind of industries. Like the growth is phenomenal, and that's across selling into SMBs, mid market, and enterprise. All the above in various forms. Different companies have attacked different ICPs. So the growth is phenomenal.
Mhm.
You typically, I would say, before this AI kind of
Mhm.
um, wave, going from 0 to 1, in a year was fantastic, right? And it still is. It still is, depending on the business that you're building. But this
Mhm.
AI proliferation has just been kind of crazy town in terms of revenue growth. And so it's our job to test, how real that is. Um, to your other question around just kind of how we think about what sticks, I think is what you're asking, like how do we think about kind of these AI
Mhm.
agents? Um, our to kind of zoom out instead of picking like a specific area like within the
Mhm.
enterprise. um, I think we have some high level kind of thoughts around where AI can kind of work. A lot of it obviously has been
Mhm.
written around kind of the manual tasks and kind of the easier automation that can happen, that can enable those functions to do better work elsewhere. I think the way that we think about it is a lot of these agents and automation plays are, I guess the key for us is a lot of the companies are taking some sort of unstructured data.
Mhm.
They're generating some sort of key insights, and ultimately, hopefully, the agent can kind of act and
Mhm.
provide automated actions on those insights, which then generates more insights to kind of train kind of the model to do more, and then hopefully more automation can happen through that. I think it's creating unique data, having unique data, and then creating unique data that's kind of important to us. And then I think a lot of the things that we think about in terms of hopefully durability of long-term investments is of these agents is I think a lot of the investments that were made in, you call it 2021, in that time frame, there a lot of it was just kind of better, faster, cheaper, like optimizations on like how do we can do better UI, better, you know. I think there's agents can do something better, but I think what we're looking for is how can agents do something different in the future, whether that's enabling somebody else within the function to do something different or doing a different processes that solves the answer or your solution much differently and ultimately better, something that we kind of think about and care about um, going forward.
Mm. I think you mentioned a couple of things. One thing it's about like, I'm just curious, like what does a marketing company do to generate that amount of revenue, just out of curiosity. And I think you mentioned about like, the like basically AI agent leverage unique data to generate some sort of like help or like answers. And I wonder like how do you think about like what if a startup that's like spending money to purchase a bunch of like unique data set versus like the startup that are come with like a unique data set but that's tied to one company.
Okay, first question was just curiosity around the marketing, what they were building in a sense.
Yeah. Just because I feel like marketing tools, like I haven't really hear about it for a long time, just because
Yeah,
like most people are really, I think right now the big trend is like renovating the traditional industry, but I never consider marketing as like something traditional since like there's many like I consider Google as a marketing company, right? Like
yeah,
or like yeah.
yeah. This one in particular, from what I remember, was more focused around um, running potential effect. I'm going to simplify it to just so I don't like kind of. There's a lot of marketing companies that are building stuff, but I mean, they were theoretically you could replace if you were a smaller company, you could replace a marketing agency and being a full stack marketing agency with software effectively. Run your campaigns, advertise, get all the right messaging, all that kind of stuff
Mhm.
for companies. Yeah. But there's a
Got
lot. There's a lot that we've seen in terms of campaigns, um, uh, marketing asset kind of optimization, all this kind of stuff that's been out there as well.
Yeah, I feel like in that realm, like there's so many companies that are kind of like I would say like Jasper-ish. So it's just like a one-stop shop for posting online content or like making a website and stuff like that. Um, my curiosity is like, how do you differentiate like between one company versus another? Is the growth even sustainable since like they're generating sure 7 million today, but like tomorrow, let's say ChatGPT or DeepSeek or somewhere launch like a better model, that people may as well just use like the traditional tools to generate some of these things. How do you define like the mode in these kind of companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we think about and challenge ourselves internally of the iteration of this tech, and you mentioned OpenAI and what they could launch, could it kill it? Like we think about that a lot of the durability and the sustainability of the revenue. Everything right now seems like it's, oh yeah, it's an AI platform or tool. We
Mhm,
should just give it a try, right? Like it's let's just buy, and then maybe next year there's some churn or that it's not useful, right? And I think that's
mhm,
what you're talking about. That's something that we debate internally. I think kind of going back to the second question after the marketing question about you mentioned about data.
mhm,
I think the things that we think about are how is this tool or platform agent or agent is like creating new proprietary data that didn't exist before.
mhm,
Um, I don't know if it's a moat, but I think ingesting data sources, third-party data sources isn't one, right? I think everyone's doing that to some degree and has done that to some degree in the past. But it's like what are you creating with that, and then what are you creating with your own processes um, to have unique data that no one else can get
mhm,
or have. I think is kind of the key thing that we're looking for, and then you build some of the automations and actions uh, off that, and it's kind of a loop, right?
mhm.
It creates better actions and so on and so on.
Mm. Quickly say out to the audience, hi Mohammed. Okay, so you mentioned about like, how they have to have like a unique set of data and then like I guess like how do they typically acquire the data? Is that like one of the founders came from a very unique specific subject expertise area and then brings the industry connections, or I'm just like I've been just thinking about the legal arena. Like there's so many like legal AI tools and um like I feel like a lot of or like the medical device AI tools or like stuff like that. So maybe you just like one person have very strong industry connection and just connect the company to some industry connection. But I wonder how do people normally acquire the data? And for the company that actually come through to go into your desk that they have to achieve a certain amount of like revenue benchmark to even be there. So like what's the differentiation between them versus a company that like, seed, pre-seed that didn't even get there yet?
Okay, let's tackle the data one first.
Yeah.
And then I have some questions just for clarity on the second one. So
Mhm.
I guess the acquisition of data is kind of what you're kind of
Mhm.
asking. I mean, I think a lot of the companies right now, they're it's all integrations with kind of existing data sources, whether that's, in our world, call it integrations with the known who's who of, Salesforce, Zendesk, HubSpot,
Mhm.
all the normal kind of players that you can kind of start with. But I think it's whatever the tool that you're building will ultimately, you might be able to create data based on what you're building for your ultimate end customer, whether that's support, whether that's marketing, whether that's a product feedback tool. Like you're creating new data based on, maybe you're ingesting customer data that you're
Mhm.
getting from your customers to hopefully create some new insights. I don't know if that kind of helps answer a little bit of the
Mhm.
question of where to start
Yeah.
on that data.
So yeah. I'm
Okay.
I'm saying like I think you're saying like, they're creating data from the customers as well, besides like just like literally pull it from somewhere
Yeah, they're creating it with their customers based on
with
what
the
their
customer.
product is
Yeah.
building, right? And they're combining it with some of those other data sources to create a then a new again kind of
Mhm.
piece of data, right? And
Mhm.
so I think it's that first party data that you're creating with your own tool or your own
Mhm.
platform that makes, and then
Mhm.
combining that with the external, the third party kind of data, which
Mhm.
hopefully makes it uh, useful, or
Mhm.
it's something that's institutional to your process, right? Like
Mhm.
that, in your head that this is how the way that we do things. That is unique data, right?
Mhm. For sure. I wonder, another question was like, uh, I had was like, for the team that are successfully racing from you guys in like Series A to C, um, are like, is there any typical profile? Because I feel like Silicon Valley is very built based on like, the YC founders, or like, a lot of people are really highlighting on the strong technical chops, but when like the company that actually raised from like Series A to C, in your opinion, like is there like a founder profile or like a team um like dynamic that's like surprising to you? Like maybe they're like coming from industry, or I guess like would you prefer the founders come from certain industry and being an expert, or versus like the very young like YC vibe people?
I'm going to give you a horrible answer. It all depends. Um, I think demonstrating that you have a passion area with the problem that you're solving,
Mhm.
whether that you lived it, which means you
Mhm.
probably have some domain expertise,
Mhm.
or when it's an experience that irked you the wrong way,
Mhm.
or anything that can kind of demonstrate why you're solving this problem, whether you're
Mhm.
young or later in your career. I think for me, that's what matters. Do you have
Mhm.
that energy to kind of go solve that problem? Because this is a long journey and like things are
Mhm.
going to go sideways. And so, do you
Mhm.
have that stamina to kind of want to work on this? And again, want to work on this can be defined multiple different ways, whether that's you just you've lived it and you want to go solve it, or it's just kind of that passion project. So I
Mhm.
think the YC founder kind of archetype, or there's some professional, like I call them professional founders, because they don't need to, they may be later in their career and they don't need to go do this, but
Mhm.
they have that passion and they want to kind of break through and do something great. That's kind of the archetype that I gravitate towards. It's not the inexperienced, less experienced. And I'll give you the other another example. Sometimes, yes, a lot of people will say they want domain knowledge and industry expertise. Um,
Mhm.
I do too. Don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
But I think there's a level of judgment on that we have to make, and that they have to make, that the way that they viewed the world for the last however many years that have created that institutional knowledge about the industry, is that the way that the next 20 years are going to be?
Mm,
And so
mm,
sometimes that bias on having that industry knowledge can be wrong. And so sometimes
mm,
you could argue, and venture, oh, I'm super honest, venture people can talk, say all contradictory things at all times. Uh, Sometimes you need the fresh perspective, right? The unbiased view to change the world. And so
mm,
sometimes you want to integrate and have that balance. And so sometimes maybe that industry uh, background and knowledge might not be as relevant
mm.
because you have that unbiased approach. Again, it kind of all depends, and I mentioned kind of the puzzle piece, like it's a bunch of influencing factors that kind of determine whether that founder, we think that founder is someone to bet on.
Mm, I wonder, so like since you have invested, for example, like I would say tax software or um I guess like store operations software, do you have any like I guess like for let's say the I was just looking at Fonoa, like so for the tax software industry, like how do you think about AI disrupting the sector versus like if you're just like using like traditional technology, and how maybe if you could like tell us more about like how do you see that sector to be innovated, and like how do you kind of evaluate the deals in the particular sector. I'm just using
Yeah,
like tax example, but
yeah. I'll talk a little bit high level about Fonoa,
mhm, mhm,
and why we're so bullish on tax. I think
mhm,
one, if you think about tax, and this is sales tax, is where they kind of focus in on, and broader tax returns and
mhm,
filing. A lot of that's manual.
mhm,
Looking up, I'm a product. I sell a product online. You sell a product California versus New York, different tax rates, right? And so it's kind of a manual lookup in terms of figuring that out,
mhm,
which seems like technology and ultimately AI running the process from the lookup is not AI, but I mean it's that lookup and manual process of building software around and then matching and then going through the automated flow of ultimately uh, tax reporting, tax filing. That could be an automated action that AI could
mhm,
kind of help replace. And you
mhm,
think of some of the services industries, that's where AI is going to hopefully do its work. There are a bunch of, call it, um, service organizations, accounting organizations specifically, at least in the tax field, that have swaths of teams that go do this for companies, right? There's
mhm,
tax prep and tax services from the big four,
mhm,
where AI can obviously do kind of its thing to help kind of minimize or optimize and change the way that work gets done on the sales tax
mhm,
perspective. Those are the types of industries that we're interested in, is kind of where those kind of duties uh, fall, and that's why we've been super excited about kind of the Fonoa, because they can hopefully, still early, take away that whole kind of process for a company, which can be a huge liability for these large organizations.
mm. I wonder, I guess like for the diligence side, like can you walk us through like how do you kind of like think about is there like any specific framework that you use to actually diligence these companies? So for example, talking to customers or introducing them to, I think at this stage, it's probably passing like introducing them to like design partners, since they have clients like Uber and Squarespace, Remote, and a bunch of other companies. I guess like how do you validate the sustainability of the business,
Yeah,
and what kind of like profit margin that you feel like um it's like giving you like a piece of confidence to like invest in the company, like
yeah.
basically the diligence process, I would say.
Yeah, I would say the diligence for us is, again, aside from like team stuff, like
Mhm,
team references, like understanding how they think in alignment. That's obviously a huge part of it. Again, tapping some of those references. I guess from a product perspective, well, let me, before I go into the product, I mean, the numbers are the numbers. Like we'll do the work around kind of the numbers and kind of validate some of what they're telling us, and kind of hopefully project a little bit about the future.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the work that we do to hopefully get a good perspective is either talking to their customers at some point of the process. We're always respectful of like not bothering their customers until we're getting closer. But we have a portfolio. Omers has a
Mhm.
larger portfolio of all the other assets that the broader Omers organization has invested in. And so can we
Mhm.
tap those resources and our network too, having
Mhm.
been in the Valley for going on year 22
Mhm.
or something like that now. We've built a network of potential prospects of customers within those industries, and we want to get the perspective of the buyers.
Mhm.
And would they buy this product? What are their challenges? Um, um, how would they implement this? How would they onboard this? All those types of questions to help us determine whether it's going to be kind of long term in the future. But it's really largely relying on kind of the network we've kind of built to help provide us with some of those answers, because we're on the investment side. We're not buying this product, right, or implementing it. So we
Mhm.
want to understand all those aspects
Mhm.
um, of it.
I wonder from like a fund construction or like how like the deployment speed wise, like, so how do you think about like, each year, do you have like a quota that you're trying to hit? Or like, so for example, let's say you invest, I don't know, every year, five company, two Series
Yeah.
A, two Series B, and one Series C or something like that.
Yeah.
Or do you think about like, for example, for a company like Fonoa, like, or like other companies, do they all come into the portfolio within a month, or like do they just like split like very sporadically, like, this whole year we invested like five company, and then this is like how fast we're deploying, and then like the valuation as well as like these like different other factors, and yeah.
Yeah, it's just all like we have goals. Like
Right.
companies, we have goals, right? And so I would say for me and kind of the enterprise application team, our goal is for this year is to find 2 to 3 investments
Mhm.
in that realm of kind of that A to C. And again, these check sizes are different, so we can kind of play with the number of investments that we make. That's the goal. In terms of timing, I mean, it's all over the place, right? It's like we don't get the
Mhm.
sometimes, I mean, people are preempting deals, but sometimes we don't get to determine when companies fundraise, right? And so, um, right now is a pretty busy time. Everyone woke up, Jan 1 and let's ready to go, and everyone seems to
Mhm.
be wanting to fundraise. You've heard stories where the summer is slower. It
Mhm.
To some it is, to some we're typically kind of busy, and then for some reason, the back half in December and November, everyone wants to try to race right before the end of the year. But whether we find one or not, I think it's dependent on the company. And I think a lot of factors, like I said, go into that. But I think for us, it's just about finding the right deal, the right team, the right founder, the right product. I don't think
Mhm.
there's a, there's a forcing mechanism to try to get money out the door, just for the sake of getting money out the door and doing investments. I think
Mhm.
it's about finding the right investment so we can be patient, but we're
Mhm.
also antsy. I'd be lying if we're not antsy of trying to find that right company, and
Mhm.
we're actively trying to do that.
I wonder, how do you like compare your portfolio companies like performance bench among like other competitors after you invest in them? And in like, I guess like when you're like reporting to the LP, or like when you're like reporting internally, how do you like kind of like track the growth of the company? Obviously, they could talk about like the customer growth, or the geographic, or like some sort of like um, hard benchmarks, but like how do you think about them versus like the competitors, to like, yeah, how they're
Yeah,
performing basically?
I mean, I would say luckily our strategy has previously and still is to be active board members. So we do take
Mhm.
board seats in most
Right.
of our deals, especially if we're leading. So we obviously get a lot of that information and help
Mhm.
shape some of the trajectory and understanding of the trajectory in kind of talking during board meetings and throughout the year. So we get to collect that data, and we do run our own internal benchmarks of all the portfolios. We've got 70 plus portfolio companies, right? And so we can kind of benchmark how they're doing from the competitive landscape. Look, everyone's trying to figure out what our competitors are doing
Mhm.
through either our networks of hearing and hearsay. Sometimes we can't validate it, but
Mhm.
it's trying to. I think it's one of those things where you want to be aware of what your competitors are doing, but you can't be um, always comparing yourself. You got to kind of build your own business with keeping them in
Mhm.
mind, right? Yes, you want to be
Mhm.
obsessive around what your competitors are doing, but you got to build your own business, and
Mhm.
things might not be the truth that you hear out there. But
Sure.
we luckily get access to data and help shape. Hopefully help shape our companies based on that data of what we're seeing within our own portfolio to share back
Mhm.
with our portfolio.
Do you give them like a entire like checklist on like, hey, can you share XYZ metrics? Or like do they just like do you just wait for them to like share with you XYZ, whatever they are sharing?
I mean, we get a lot of the information during our board meetings. There's duties
Right.
they need to report back on. There's certain metrics that we do ask for, but they're not new. They're not anything that you wouldn't have provided in a board kind of
Mhm.
setting
Mhm.
anyways.
Mhm.
So it's nothing I would say it's nothing revolutionary that we're collecting necessarily.
Mm. I wonder where does like later stage founder social? Like since I feel like for earlier stage, let's say the pre-seed stage, seed stage founders, you can find them almost anywhere. Like, people socialize a lot and like, but I wonder for the later stage founder, is there like a particular, I guess, like conferences or things that like they do to you can meet them in badge? Obviously we talk about like private dinners and stuff, but like I mean this is
Yeah.
like a separate note. But how I guess like is there any traditional place to find the founders that you end up actually investing?
I mean, I would say later stage founders are still at the at those happy hours and social events. Is there a gathering? I would say most because they've got traction and have built something,
Mhm.
of somewhat scale. A lot of them are at some of their own um, industry specific shows or conferences, right? Like I know, at least from a software perspective,
Mhm.
um, general broad software perspective, like I go to SaaStr every year because there's a bunch of venture investors that it's an easy place to go catch up with people all in one place, whether that's company or venture investors, right? That's always been a good one. But I think there's others company specific or industry specific ones like um, I know there's some learning ones that our team at WorkRamp goes to. There's Transform and HR tech that HR companies will go to. So there's specific industry ones. I think they show up, and we will show up at certain ones. Fintech and Office of the CFO, Money 2020, right? There's those kind of industry specific ones that we'll try to show up to because they're there because they want to talk to customers and potentially investors as well.
I wonder, so like is there any another quick question is like I guess like what are like I guess how deeply do you have to study an industry before making an investment, or is this like more towards specific companies, since like I feel like nowadays it's really hard to define each company in a particular domain.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, they're blending together. Some of them are blending together, and that's part of our thinking too. Is some of the on the agent side, there's a little bit of democratization of these functions
Mhm.
that agents are creating. I think in terms of how deep you would want to go into the sector, I think we go relatively deep, but I think if there's a danger of honestly, like you go too deep and there's nothing there, then you've wasted time, right? To
Mhm.
go do uh, to do in other sectors. So we've taken some broader high-level themes that we think about. Some of them I've listed before in the conversation, and sometimes we still look at least for us on the enterprise side, some function-specific areas, but we try to go deep enough where we get an understanding whether this is a viable space, and maybe talk to a few companies, and then kind of move on. I think there's a try to for our own selves, as much as we push founders for rapid iteration and fail fast, we try to do the same on our end on specific kind of verticals. So we try to be proactive, but proactive quickly.
Since like you've been to an HR conference, like is there any interesting thing that you've learned in that space?
Yeah. Well, we're about to go to Transform again. We put on an event in conjunction with Transform, our own little mini kind of conference ahead of the day before Transform, where we gather probably 70, 80 this year people leaders to talk about kind of authentic conversations that are challenging their function. I think the interesting thing we're going to highlight this year and hopefully get some more learnings is really how, again, the theme of AI and how AI is impacting kind of HR as a function, whether that's sourcers, recruiters, or I mean, are they even scared of getting their own job automated out, right? And parts of it. I think it's one of those rapidly changing functions. I think the CFO landscape of a couple years ago went from reactive to hopefully more proactive and strategic. And that's kind of the lens that is continuing to push of how can the CFO be more strategic? I think that's happening now again or not again, but happening in the HR and people landscape. Because technology can help them, whether that's on the data side or automation side. Like how can you make the chief people officer a little bit more strategic than reactive and helping to push the company, because without people, you want to have a company effectively. And so I think there'll be some hopefully interesting learnings that I could report back afterwards, and when we have that conversation in a couple weeks.
Wow. I wonder, like, I guess, like, how do you identify which part of the business function that you want to actually dive into? For example, HR or like marketing tech or tax. I feel like those are things that I feel like a lot of the like walking down the street and SF, like everybody's building software for I don't know, like infrastructure dev tool, and obviously that's like a part of the sector that you guys are looking at too. But like I feel like the traditional or the super traditional sector like manufacturing these days, like, but I feel like the middle part is like less heard of. Like, so for example, the retail tooling or like because I feel like that sounds like a very, or like the store operation. I feel like a lot of these like subsectors are like, I would call it like, it's just like more than traditional, like they're like already kind of like modernized by the technology, but they're not like technically like I guess like all depends on technology, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say like we look at and think about all the mainstream areas of where people are investing, right? Like the traditional areas of sales tech, we've got a couple investments in that area. But I think for the most part, in traditional industries as well, but I think for the most part, we're trying to find areas where technology and AI can impact globally or on a global sense. And that hopefully it might lead us to some nascent categories that people haven't thought of, because it's one, you mentioned it, right to win. If we can kind of get into unearth some categories that people haven't thought of that we think that can make an impact. I mean, that's our business. We're the business of putting more money where our mouth is in terms of industries and technology that can be disruptive. And so we're trying to, as much as I hate to say it, I like kind of the bold, old, boring industries, because I think that's where a lot of the money can be made from a business model perspective, and two, that's where I think technology just hasn't disrupted yet. We might be wrong, but I think those are the categories that we look into. And then in terms of like just the right to win, we do think about Omers in general and where we can help those companies or provide knowledge based on whether Omers is an enterprise organization. We've got, the larger Omers, not our ventures team, but it's a 2 to 3,000 person organization, or the other asset classes and portfolio companies that we might have within the broader Omers portfolio that might be well suited for manufacturing, supply chain, logistics is kind of where some of our vertical team is looking at, that we can provide a different lens. And so those are some of the those are just typically some older industries that we've gone into, but we don't. I think once an industry or area becomes popular by VCs and VC talk and content, like might be overdone already, right? And so it's like we want to keep aware, and we dive into those too, but I think we're more interested in other categories.
How do you think about winning like a competitive deals?
Yeah, it's something I think about all the time. I mean, it's that right to win, right? I mean, I think for us, and it goes back to one of the earlier things you asked me about, what do I always try to work on? It's selling, right? And so some of that's relationship. We try to get to founders as early as possible to build those relationships because we want to have that alignment, and hopefully by expressing our viewpoints, and whether that's online or in person, like hopefully we've built that alignment and that relationship to hopefully to win those deals. And then where can we bring other things to help build the company, whether that's customers that we can intro them to, prospects, our portfolio, our broader Omers team, because we have a diversity of assets within our portfolio. We will try to find the angle that will help them succeed.
I love that, and I want to be mindful of the time, so maybe we'll wrap up with like a 1 minute fire round. What's your favorite book?
Favorite book? Oh, you can probably see I have a set of books behind me. I would say probably the one that I have like been reading off and on is the one that's in the brown underneath the cars, the Scaling People one. It's the Claire Johnson one. It's just about scaling organizations, because I just think about high performing teams, and I'm a psych major from college, so I think about all this like kind of relating to people and how to manage. It's a very functional and tactical use case book.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
My career. That's a good question. I would take, okay, I have a mentor who I talk to and who's helped shape a lot of my career. A person named Matt Heist, who I worked with at Yahoo. I worked 6 years at High Gear Media, but I think I'm going to go with a little bit of a different answer from a mentor answer. I've gotten to try a lot of different things in my career, and I don't think having a wife that has a job that's stable and allowing me to go do some of these early stage startups and do what I want in my career, I wouldn't have been able to shape kind of where I've been without kind of her willingness to let me fail and try and do different things. So I think that's the most important part.
Love that. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to my dinner party? Anybody?
Yeah.
That's easy. I'm a big sports fan, and so I grew up watching Michael Jordan, so I would always wanted to meet him. So he would be the first one to
Love
come.
that. Where can we find you outside of work?
I have 2 kids, so I'm active at kids sporting events all day, at night, on the weekends.
Oh my God.
So you'll find me at the pool with my kids swimming, or gymnastics or basketball tournaments. That is my life outside of work.
Amazing. Wow, Eugene, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a fun conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Okay, let me quickly end